Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pensy Fan 19 review of the Volume 1 2021 Lionel Catalog, also known as the Big Book. This is usually where most of the new model trains for the year, well, sometimes they're released throughout the year, but sometimes they may be released a little bit later. But within the past few years, Lionel has had, I want to say a little bit of, how shall I say this, an interest, so to speak, in making certain liveries on present or former locomotives that may have not existed. Sometimes the result is absolutely amazing, and other times it's up to debate, depending on who you ask. Now, I have heard that there have been some images, I think, that were leaked from the Volume 1 21 catalog, or V121 as I'm going to call it, and there's been a lot of mixed reactions on that. So with that in mind, let's jump right into the catalog. So already on the front, you can see a little bit of the Acela, number 2021 for the year 2021, mainly focusing on a little bit of a blue outline, and it also shows the Acela in what looks like the Hudson tunnels. Now this could be a little bit of a reference for Moynihan Station opening in early 2021, since the Gateway tunnels, or in this case the Hudson tunnels, would connect with Penn Station, and what looks like a Lionel sign coming out from the edge of the tunnel right above it. I think you might have a little bit of a clearance problem, but that's just a catalog or front design. Anyways, let's get into it. Table of contents, LionChief Bluetooth app, puts you in control. Alright, so we have the table of contents on the left and a little bit of a advertisement for operating LionChief from your phone via Bluetooth. O-scale, already we have an Uncle Sam John Bull, I believe it is, with very good attention to detail, especially with the, I think those are the original 13 stars on the headlamp. Now, this is based on the original John Bull, one of the first steam locomotives to be built in the United States, and instead of blue, it would be something like dark green, and I think this was found within Pennsylvania or New Jersey or somewhere within that region, but the shade of blue that they're using for this is absolutely perfect for some sort of bicentennial or 1776 kind of anniversary for the United States, with what's probably the tender saying Uncle Sam on the right. So great introduction to start off faux scale, and the fall leaves in the background look very good too, as well as a shade of red for Lionel. So after this is the interior of a legacy steam, going over all the components with the motors, the wheels, specifically in brass. And first one, already we have two very interesting liveries for the 210-10-2. I'm actually really happy that they brought back this locomotive because I remember back in, I want to say around 2013, I'm not really sure if this is accurate, but I remember a very long time ago that I was interested in getting a large locomotive like this, just because of its massiveness, and there isn't really that much information on this locomotive. It's kind of like Santa Fe's answer to the Big Boy. So, the description of the locomotive is on the left, but if you want to go more into that, this is why I don't do videos without a script anymore, but that's just me. If you want to learn more about the locomotive, you can always feel free to pause the video and look at the description, or visit on Lionel.com where you could zoom in, like so. So, basically these two 10-10-2s were built in the early 1900s, I believe, to help trains with pushing locomotives up steep grades, such as Cajon Pass or Raton Pass. I'm not sure if they were used specifically on those two, but those are the first two to come to mind for steep grades in the Southwest where helper locomotives would be needed. So the actual livery that this locomotive was in is this one down here. Basically the black and what looks like turquoise green, but I'm not really sure. I think sometimes the boiler or the front would be white, because I heard that that was pretty common for some of the Santa Fe steam locomotives at the time, but I'm not sure if this would be accurate. Well, of course, this version is, specifically 3009, black wheels and darkened rods. That's a nice touch. So the main one on the top is a little bit of a fantasy livery, but it's incorporating one of the early steam locomotives liveries. I forget which one, but I think it was some sort of passenger service in Northern California. Presently, it's the Capital Corridor service, but I don't know the name of the passenger route offhand, but it uses an experimental livery in which, as you can see right here, it's the red stripe with a lot more white, yellow, and then black. And those are usually used for passenger locomotives, not so much for freight, which is very interesting. There's another black one down there, number 3001, and my personal favorite, the War Bonnet. Unfortunately, this locomotive is inconveniently placed between both pages, so I can't really, I can't really zoom in on the locomotive itself. Oof. But the thing that's interesting about the War Bonnet over here is that not only is it accurate for the most part by having the black livery, but it also incorporates one of the original black and red Lionel War Bonnets. This was actually the original livery of the Lionel War Bonnets back from the 1950s for the F units, but this was never done on a steam locomotive before, with the exception of something like a Santa Fe Switcher a few years ago. But it's a very unusual livery to have on a locomotive such as this, or at least have it for a fantasy livery on a locomotive as detailed as this. So, great way to start off the Legacy series. On to the next one. We have some USRA Pacifics. A lot of detail as always. We have Atlantic Coastline, Great Northern. The Great Northern one looks pretty interesting with the shade of green. We have Nickel Plate Road with a very interesting by war bonds tender, specifically red, white, and blue. I'll have to double check to see if that tender actually existed, but it's a bit of a good contrast with the black and gray locomotive for Nickel Plate Road. Then we have Southern Pacific on the bottom, and then we have a Greyhound Union Pacific, Light Pacific. I just realized I said Light Pacific and Union Pacific, but, well. With the Pacific, it's the usual 462 wheel arrangements. And I'm not really sure if there are that many Pacifics made by Lionel. I think you see more of the Mikados or 280s or the 080s in some cases, especially when talking about starter sets, but it's good to see that they're getting some of the little-known locomotives in here too. Kind of. Now we have a little bit more with the USRA Pacifics. We have a GM&O. Can't see what that says. The Alton Routes. Man, that's really small in the tender. And we also have an MKT. The red roof is definitely interesting with the MKT locomotive. And the coaches that it goes with are pretty interesting as well. I'm not sure if the Texas Special ever had Pullman heavyweights like this, but it definitely makes an interesting combination for a 30s or 40s streamlined train on an older passenger car. It's kind of a similar vibe that the War Bonnet 2 1010-2 we saw earlier was going for. And that seems to be, and that's also kind of similar with the Golden States GS2 Pacific that was in last year's Volume 1 catalog. And it's a certain aesthetic that Lionel's been going for recently with having somewhat older, famous liveries on little-known or older locomotives. Or in some cases, newer locomotives. So the red definitely goes well with the locomotives. I'm not really sure why the headlamp is painted red, though. I think it's kind of odd. Same thing with the cylinders, with part of it being red and the other parts being black, but that's just me. I would say maybe for the GM&O, the tender is great, but make the prints larger and maybe make the roof red. So this way, it would, or at least somewhere around the funnel, a little bit more red. So this way it wouldn't just be mostly gray and then a red dot being the light. But other than that, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so we have some 460 Camelbacks with CNJ. I think this one is preserved at the Baltimore Railroad Museum. Delaware and Hudson, pretty interesting, with some lining around the number, or in the cab. Then we have a Hallows Eve Limited. Pretty interesting to see that we have legacy Camelbacks such as this going into a holiday theme, with this one number 1313. And we have a specially painted Blue Comet Camelback. Now the CNJ did roster a lot of Camelbacks, but none of them were painted in this blue livery. Some of them may have been used for the Blue Comet between Jersey City and Atlantic City, but I don't think any of them were painted in this livery. Would have been really interesting if they did, though. So that's pretty unique. Up here we have New York, Ontario, and Western. Reading, Camelback. Nice to see that they have that in there too. As well as the Strasbourg 771. I'm not sure if there was a Strasbourg 771, but I think it's trying to, I think it's somewhat trying to copy the Camelback aesthetic that 1187 had for a while, before it was sent off a few months ago to Age of Steam Roundhouse. But I want to say that the red roof definitely stands out as vibrant, and it gives that kind of 1980s, 1990s Strasbourg feel to it. And down here, we have none other than Long Island. I think I might do an episode about the Camelbacks of Long Island eventually, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure if I'll be making it soon, but who knows? Now, alright! I'm going to skip all of these and go right over here. Yes, I may be attracted to ones that have bright colors on locomotives first, but just look at that in comparison to the rest of the Mohawks here. Yes, they did an absolutely outstanding job with the Mohawks, especially with all the valves, I guess, on the side of the boiler, and even if it's a lighter shade of gray than what it may be in person. And it looks like we have a New Haven Mohawk as well. I'm not really sure if New Haven, if they would roster something as large as that one, but I'm having mixed thoughts on the New Haven one, though. I'm not saying it's bad, but there's a certain aesthetic that New York Central steam locomotives have that isn't really transferable with New Haven locomotives. They're kind of like two different breeds, so to speak. And of course, we have the gray New York Central J3 Hudson livery on a Mohawk, looking also fantastic on the locomotive, similar to when Lionel had this similar livery on, I think it was Niagara 2 or 3 years ago. And then we have the Pacemaker. This might win my award for most favorite or personal favorites legacy locomotive of the catalog. Last year it was the Southern Pacific Golden State Daylight for the GS3, but I want to say the front near the smoke box is very interesting, with the silver being significantly brighter than its real-life counterparts. It's a lot more silver than gray. Although the wheels are a different shade of gray as well, it doesn't really match up with the rest of the silver that's there, but there's a little bit of a reflection on the tender, so that can provide for some pretty interesting aesthetics, especially when placed next to all these Pacemaker boxcars. So this is definitely up there for one of my favorite in the catalog so far. Now we go on to the Legacy Diesel. We have a clear view of the locomotive. Notice all the details there. The motor that runs it. So, I'm doing a standing ovation right now. Lionel made SD70 ACE heritage units. Thank you, Lionel. This is great. We have Great Northern, we have Monon, we even have Santa Fe and Baltimore and Ohio. I thought the BNSF was going to do something like Santa Fe and Great Northern for their 25th anniversary heritage program back in 2020. But in addition to these heritage units, such as Atlantic Coastline, we also have the legitimate Canadian Pacific SD70 heritage unit. So that's a nice combination of real and fantasy, or the one real exception. Make that two exceptions with the US and Mexico KCS Heroes heritage unit. Well, not really heritage unit, but still. These actually look very good on the SD70 ACE. And one thing in particular is especially the horn on the Boston and Maine. It definitely stands out in comparison to the white or the kind of milk color, so to speak, that's going throughout the engine. And Monon, even though I would have preferred the gray and red livery, the SD70 ACE still rocks the gold and black for this one. And it also looks great on Baltimore and Ohio. So great job on Lionel for making the Heritage SD70 ACEs. Let's see what we have for the next one. We have some Alco PA sets with MKT, New Haven, and even the Cotton Belt. I'm not sure if there was a Southern Pacific Alco PA before, but Cotton Belt is, I think it was owned by Southern Pacific at one point based on the livery, or at least it's a Southern Pacific subsidiary. But it's very good to see that smaller railroads such as Cotton Belt are are being recognized as well. And the gray roof on the top of the conveyor belt looks interesting too. I'm not sure if the roof was gray like this or red like the rest of the locomotive, but I could be wrong. Now we have the ever so classic Delaware and Hudson PA set with the two Delaware and Hudson Alco PAs, as well as an appropriate amount of D&H coaches, I think. Although there's something up with the Delaware and Hudson observation car. I think in the, I want to say the mid-1970s when the Adirondack was shared between the D&H and Amtrak, the observation car that they used was either an Amtrak one or something like this, where they had the yellow line on top and the Amtrak logo in the middle. But I think the Amtrak logo was removed, probably due to trademark reasons, but it's nice to see that Amtrak got this in as well, along with the RPAs. Wow, we even have an Erie locomotive. So, I'm not really sure if there are that many O-gauge models of the Erie locomotive PA, and I'm not sure if the top was, I'm not sure if this was the right shade of black in comparison to the rest of the locomotive, especially on the nose here. I think it might have been the same shade of gray that might have been used throughout. Again, heavily based on the locomotive scheme, but they also have the, forget that phone in the background. They also have some pretty good coaches that go along with it. So let's see what they have. Gulf Mobile and Ohio. Again, I don't think there was this much black on the actual locomotive. This might have been all of red, this kind of shade of red over here, or maybe this one in the middle. So I'm not really sure if they did it as accurately with the black, and I'm not really sure if they pulled Pullman heavyweights down here too. I think they might have pulled Bud or Pullman lightweights, so to speak, but not the 6-axle coaches, I don't think. But good job with the PAs. Let's see. Now we have the GP30s. We have Soonline on the top, as well as a half Santa Fe, half BNSF GP30. I always found this locomotive to be a little bit interesting with the Santa Fe. It's kind of like a GP30 fake bonnet, so to speak. Well, obviously it was a Santa Fe Jeep first, but the way they patched it over made it pretty interesting. And what's Santa Fe, or rather what's a BNSF Santa Fe Jeep without its BN counterpart? As well as a very interesting Chicago Northwestern GP30. Definitely a vibrant shade of green. I think the real thing might have been a little bit of a darker shade of green, kind of a little bit darker than Burlington Northern over here, but it's pretty good. They also did a great job on chassis system, BNO, KCS, and Reading. So it's good to see that actually that is Reading and Northern for their GP30. So it's nice to see that they got a modern short line that uses it nowadays as well. Now we have the Veranda turbine. We have pretty interesting submissions for, rather, pretty interesting versions of this. First, we have the original Union Pacific turbines, and I'm not sure if there's a slightly different shade of yellow between 61 and 69, but still, these are the original liveries. Followed by Alaska, Great Northern, looks pretty interesting, and Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania one actually looks pretty natural because it kind of reminds me of the shark noses that they had. So nothing too out of the ordinary there. Same thing goes with Rio Grande. I think with the, probably the Alco PAs look a little bit similar to this, so it's not too strange. Same thing with Southern Pacific. Then we go into the, half of the locomotive is gray on the top, and then all of it in the Greyhound. I'm not sure if the angle for the, for the front of the Greyhound is accurate in comparison. Come to think of it, I don't think there were any diesels on UP rosters that had the Greyhound livery like this, or at least none of the major locomotives like this. They all had the yellow livery. And then there's the U.S. Department of Defense, or U.S. Army one. I forget which one it was, but I reviewed this last year. Maybe it was the Volume 2 Lionel Catalog. It was a shark nose that had this livery. I can kind of see this on here, since it's pretty big. Kind of looks somewhat similar to the shark nose with a flat front or rounded off front. But very interesting, so to speak. And for some reason, the way they just made the Greyhound's livery a little bit different on the locomotive here makes it stand out. And I'd say out of the ones listed here, strangest would definitely be Great Northern, something about the walkway here. And favorite in this category would be the Greyhound. So we have the SW8 with the classic New York Central. Pretty interesting livery for Conrail. I think this is supposed to be blue, or yeah, I think the radiator is supposed to be blue instead of gray, but not well. We also have Seaboard Coastline for the SW8, as well as Boston and Maine with the number plates on the top. Next we have a pretty interesting livery for Rock Island. This must have been one of the earlier ones, probably when it was delivered, so to speak, as well as a fire exit on the locomotive. We also have Core Brewing Company, Strasburg 8618, and Southern Pacific on the bottom as well. And it looks like the Coors Brewing Company is part of the Coors Beer. Again, very interesting to see Legacy Series going into some of the other categories that Lionel usually has for stuff like starter sets or expansion cars. Now we have the Acela, the official licensed Amtrak Acela, which appeared on the cover of this catalog. So we have one power car, a first class, and what looks like two coaches, and then another power car. So only 3 power cars, and you need to get the cafe car and the other 2 coaches to finish the set. Oh well. At least they're bringing back the Acela. I heard that the original Acela from something like 2006 or 7 wasn't really received too well with customers, so hopefully whatever bugs they may have found in the old one may have been fixed here if they're re-releasing it. And what I find is very interesting here is this is I think it's the America Express or something like that. I think it was America Express, but this is the original concept art for American Flyer. That's the name of it. This is the original concept art for the Acela with the phase 1, well, not phase 1, but with the pointless arrow on the cars. It may look a little bit more abstract, so to speak, when compared to the existing Acela, but it's very interesting that Amtrak is, or rather Lionel's, recognizing this original version of the Amtrak, specifically with the brighter shade of blue and a little bit more defined lining, so to speak, between the 2 power cars. And most notably having the original pointless arrow logo, since this was proposed in 1998, I want to say, but a few years before they adopted the Phase 5 logo that we all know and love. And then we have New Haven and Hiawatha Acelas. I want to say I'm a fan more of the coaches for these 2, for the Hiawatha, but more of a fan of the locomotive for the New Haven. For the New Haven set, of course, these are very creative ideas, to say the least. But for New Haven, I would say I like the locomotive more than the coaches. And for Milwaukee Road, I would say I like the coaches more than the locomotive. I mean, I could see the Hiawatha being put in the back over there a little bit, but something with the red suspension, so to speak, or the red rims, or the axle, so to speak, holding the cars along with the orange, that definitely makes it a little bit of a... It definitely puts it up there. So I'm not sure if I'm going to rate my favorite from the Acela set, because I heard there might be a few more based on the locomotives or based on the coaches, or both. And just like that, we go into even more Acela sets. So we have the what looks like the M10,000 version of the Union Pacific for the Acela, which makes sense, seeing that the M10,000 was the Union Pacific's first streamlined train set. Then we have the Pennsylvania. I could actually see something like this happening in real life, since the Acela runs on Pennsylvania New Haven trackage. The coaches, I think, are used from the Bud steel cars or something like that. The Pennsy used to have steel coaches with a brown line on the top, just like that, and Lionel did a great job recreating that with the coaches, but this isn't Lionel's fault. It's not really that good of a transition from the locomotive to the coach cars, which is a little bit of a shame because, of course, being Pennsy fan 19, the locomotive for this is absolutely amazing, but maybe if it had matching coaches, it would be a little bit better, but it wouldn't be historically accurate. So I'm not really taking away any points for that. And then there's the Santa Fe, which looks pretty believable, so to speak. The what do you call them? I think that's the Santa Fe Chief logo on the side. And it goes well with the locomotive. Some pretty interesting submissions for the Acela. And are there any more? No? Alright. So we have a nickel plate road work train set. Very interesting to see we have an SW8 as well as a TMCC ballast tamper. Don't see that nowadays for Lionel. Just loading a little bit. As well as a few other work cars and a tanker over there. And they even have a speeder on the flatbed. Not sure why you would need a speeder on the flatbed, but it's a work train, so why not? Now we have the Acela Packer and the New Hope and Ivyland Excursion. Very interesting train sets from two very different time periods. The Acela Packer was basically the alternative passenger train for Lehigh Valley's Black Diamond from, I want to say, Communipaw, Jersey City to Buffalo, but I'm not sure if the Acela Packer had the same, I think it had the same red as the Black Diamond for Lehigh Valley. I don't really think it was an orange for the Acela Packer, or an orangish red, if that makes any sense. And the New Open Night, I can see the GP30 working, but I'm not sure if any of the coaches were repainted in this livery. It definitely matches with the locomotive, but I'm not really sure if, nor to be more realistic, I think about 2 years ago, Amtrak had a passenger train set from the early 70s with a few coaches from Penn Central, Pennsylvania, New York Central, as well as some Amtrak repainted coaches in order to make it more accurate. I think Lionel could have used that kind of thinking, so to speak, when making the New Hope and Ivyland set, such as painting some of the coaches dark green or having at least one, but not all of them in this shade of red, so this way it could be a little bit more realistic. So those are just a few things to improve on, maybe for the next time. And 1926 Cardinals train set. I've never heard of this one, but it looks pretty interesting. You have a typical New York Central 482 over here, but the coaches are... I've never really seen anything like that for the New York Central before. It must have been from the, I want to say from the early 1900s, well, 1926 it says right there, but I'll have to look into this. It definitely looks interesting. So great job with having that kind of livery on the coaches. And I'll move on to the next one. This is the one that I was referring to earlier. The Santa Fe Valley Flyer. There we go. That's one that I was referring to with the 210-10-2 earlier. How they had that locomotive in this paint scheme right here. I think this was only used for the Valley Flyer, but it was basically a regional service from, I want to say, Bakersfield to Northern California, but I'll try and find more information about it later. But the thing with this set is that it's kind of little known, and it's great to see that Lionel is recognized. I think there was an 8-show gauge version of this train and the locomotive. I'm not sure if it involved the coaches, but I don't think anyone actually did the full locomotive and train set in O-scale like this. So it's great to see that Lionel was able to do this for 2021. And I think the front of the locomotive has been modified to make it more Santa Fe specific. Specifically with the headlight being towards the top, which is typical of most Santa Fe locomotives at the time. Now we have the John Bull sets. We have the original Pennsylvania Railroad one over here on the flatbed, probably for a display. Don't mind if Lionel is taking mild the buffer on this one. Oh well. The way they have Pennsylvania Railroad on the side while we're here kind of looks pretty interesting, so to speak. Let's see if... I'm not really sure if that was made in the 1800s or not, but I'll have to check that later. This is the original livery that the John Bull was in. Brown and green for, I want to say, 1840s or 50s style coaches. Then we have Uncle Sam John Bull set, which is very patriotic and represents the U.S. well. For something like 4th of July event. Now we have the Rio Grande Ski Train. Very interesting consist. Some pretty accurate coaches. Now we're going on to the Vision boxcars. I'll try and go through this a little bit. I must say that CP Rail Gondola is pretty interesting. Now we have some beer cars, as they call it. And some tool cars on the right. Kitchen cars, bunk cars, standard O double box cars, Trying to see if there's anything that catches my eye at the moment. Some legacy speeders. I think the legacy speeders have been around for, I want to say, 15 years. I think it was one of the first avenues that Lionel tried the legacy concept in, as well as a pretty interesting BNSF tamper. Now we have O-Gauge. Now, this is a little bit of a scaled-down version of O-Scale, in which it's not entirely nut for bolts accurate to the real thing, but it still provides for some pretty interesting results. We have the universal remote over here. Just some more stuff about LionChief. We have the K4, pretty interesting. So it's nice to see that we have this variety of the K4 into LionChief, because I think this was usually, I think there was a legacy version of some of these K4s about 2 years ago, but it's good to see that it went to the LionChief realm as well, especially with 5409 with the Tuscan Brown livery. Makes it stand out when compared to the Tuscan Green. Now we have some RS3s. We have the experimental Lehigh Valley RS3. As I learned from the MTH catalog, yes, this was an experimental livery, even though I don't think it was widely used on the Lehigh Valley. And we also have a Pennsylvania RS3, as well as typical Santa Fe and Southern. Now we have the GP7 with ACL, MKT, B&O, and Rock Island. My personal favorite of the four here, with ACL as a close second. Now we have the... Interesting that they're still showcasing Big World, Big Adventures for the Lionel sets instead of, well, I don't think anyone in the community wants to recognize the post-BWBA series, to say the least, but now we have a few boxcars that are Wubba specific. We still have Toy Story here with, I think the hand car is new, so that's nice. As well as the Pizza Planet Aquarium car. Now we got a Disney Pixar boxcar this time. So it's good to see that they're expanding on this realm a little bit, especially seeing that Cars is getting a new series on Disney Plus with a few other shows. And they originally started off this series with the Lightning McQueen Jeep over here. But the Monsters Inc. flat car or gondola is pretty new too. So it's nice to see that Lionel is expanding in the Disney Pixar realm, seeing that Disney Pixar is starting to grow, especially with the advent of Disney Plus, with it being more available for more people, and thus relating to a broader audience with stuff like this. And of course, we also have Frozen 2. At least we have, I think almost all of these sets have some sort of expansion from last year or two to show that they're still growing. Now we have an entirely new starter set for John Deere this time. I remember 2 or 3 years ago they had an RS3 and an 080 steam locomotive, but now they have something a little bit more contemporary, that being GP38. And they also have different freight cars for the whole set too, with the exception of the flat car with the 3 tractors over here. But the gas station also looks pretty interesting. It looks like an interesting add-on to the John Deere set. So very interesting to note on that one. Then we have the classic Harry Potter train set. We have a new Halloween train, the Hallows Eve Limited. That seems to be the new set, or the new name that they're giving for this one. 1031 leading. Then we have a little bit more. Interesting to see that they have a LionChief 440 as an add-on to the original set, or to the theme. Very interesting. We have a NASA train this time. Now, NASA does have an actual railroad, but they have, I think, SW1001s or SW1500s for the actual railroad. They don't have GP38s, but it's still good to see that they have other NASA-related freight cars over here, such as the boxcar, the fuel tanker, and even the Space Launch Transit is pretty interesting. Now we have Area 51, again, based on the Area 51, that whole meme, so to speak. Now we have Star Trek. I think Lionel is starting to go into a outer space or space theme within recent years. Because last year they had Star Trek, they also had Area 51, now we have NASA. Here's a little bit more about Star Trek. I think the boxcars focusing on specific characters are new as well. Now we have Budweiser, which if you would have seen a Lionel Catalog about 5 or 10 years ago, this would have been Coca-Cola or something like that. Now they're expanding on Bud. Now we have a pretty interesting KCS Tier 4 set. I want to say these two containers at the back are pretty interesting with the black and yellow. These containers don't exist in real life, but it's a pretty interesting concept, and it actually fits pretty well with the rest of the set. And I think this was in last year's catalog too, with the Chesapeake and Ohio starter set. Now we have the original Lionel Lines freight set to celebrate the 120th anniversary. Hey, it's 2021, but we're still celebrating 120 years. It's a great landmark for any company to reach. Now we have the Santa Fe Super Chief. What would be Lionel without the Super Chief? Now we have the Union Pacific Flyer. We just got this a few months ago too, as well as the Blue Comet, both of which can be found on the channel. Sorry for the shameless ad. Then we have the U.S. Army, the Pennsylvania Keystone set, as well as a Tier 4 GEVO leading a regular container train, and a typical Norfolk Southern GEVO leading a somewhat small mixed train, so to speak, with a boxcar towering over the auto rack. Then we have the Alaska GP30 pulling a few freight cars, as well as the Lehigh Valley U-boats. Although I don't think the U-boat car body was that low to the ground. I want to say make this section down here a little bit higher, so this way it's a little bit more accurate. But then you might have a lot of high clearances, seeing that it's already towering over the boxcar over here, but oh well. And I'm having a problem zooming out. So just kind of to expand on this a little bit, I want to say about the height from the platform to the yellow line should be the height from the platform to the wheel. So this way it's a little bit higher and a little bit more spread out, and to be more accurate. There we go. Now we have some generals and 080s over here. The Pennsylvania Railroad 440 looks pretty interesting too, especially with the smokestack being different than the average Western or American steam locomotive that people would usually think of when associating with the Wild Wild West. Then we have a few more 080s from Santa Fe, Great Northern, Reading, pretty interesting addition, and Southern with war bonds. Not really sure if Southern had this livery, but it's definitely interesting for the 080 to have. Now we have more U-36Bs. I could see this where I'm okay with this. Even if there's a little bit of a gap between the coupler and the front locomotive, it's still high enough for it to be accurate. That's what the Lehigh U-boat needs from a few pages ago. Sorry. So we have Santa Fe, Union Pacific, pretty interesting on this one. Seaboard System, not Seaboard Coastline, and the Y2CSX livery. And along with the GP38, we have Conrail, Burlington Northern Heritage Unit. There are a few heritage stickers on the side to represent Burlington Northern's anniversary, as well as the chassis system. Now we have some boxcars from Looney Tunes and Scooby-Doo, courtesy of Warner Brothers. We have some Batman boxcars over here. Ford Motor Company, as well as Chevrolet on the other page. Probably an equal amount of boxcars and other accessories for Ford and Chevy fans alike. I'd go with the Mustang, but that's my opinion. We have these are some pretty interesting anniversary boxcars. I must say it's pretty creative for the Amtrak one over here with the Phase 2 with 1971 and 2021 with the current Acela, which makes sense to see if they're using the current Acela instead of the Avelia Liberty, since they're still testing that and it didn't go into service yet. And the Erie boxcar is pretty interesting too, from 1851 to 2021. And we also have a few other boxcars down here about paintings and World War II, Wings of Angels, Molson Coors. I think that's part of Coors Light, I assume. We have more presidents with Lyndon B. Johnson, Chester Arthur, Franklin Pierce. I did a report on Franklin Pierce a long time ago for a history project, so that's nice. We have a few hoppers, ore cars, Lionel Ale over here. Shark containment unit. Nickel Road. This is kind of like a miscellaneous page, I assume, in which you're having a Brill streetcar with intermodals. But it's good to see that this streetcar in particular, the Fort Collins Municipal Railway, it's actually one of the few street railways in Colorado that still has the Brill streetcar like this. So it's good to see that Lionel recognized that. And then we have the personalized cabooses down here. I think the cabooses are new, but we've always had the personalized boxcars. Now we have the Christmas season. We have the Polar Express Acela. Yep, the Acela isn't done with this catalog yet because they had to make a Polar Express one. It's not too bad. The snow could be a little bit better or a little bit more realistic. It wouldn't really be that wavy if it's on a flat surface, but the locomotive looks pretty good for that. Going back on the Acela, I would say my favorite would probably be, probably Milwaukee Road or New Haven. Like I said, New Haven for the locomotive, Milwaukee for the coaches. So onto the Polar Express, we have a freight service now, number 1224, with an 080 switcher, which for some reason the word doesn't line up with the tender. It's too much to the left and not centered. Oh well. We also have some hot chocolate over here, Polar Express boxcar, caboose. Pretty good or pretty standard freight set for the Polar Express, as well as a Polex speeder and a few other freight cars, even the Preston station. Then we have the option of with snow or without snow, although I thought I saw a little bit more of without snow cars, since if you collect a lot of Polar Express passenger cars without the snow, and then all of a sudden, like 5 years ago, they start adding the snow on the top, then you have to do it all over again, or not. Because the snow and without snow doesn't really go well with the black roof and the white roof, it wouldn't really be consistent. So you have some more Polex related accessories, as well as a Disney train set over here, with probably a few other new freight cars as well. Christmas light, Winter Wonderland, North Pole Central with the light up tracks, and then Miscellaneous. Here's a little bit more. At least Lionel is still a SledX. Nice. It's actually a pretty good name for a Christmas packaging company. It's good to see that Lionel is still adding more for their expansion sets and for their holidays, or their holiday themes, to show that they're still making new freight cars and new related box cars. So I'm just going through the accessories. Ah yes, the fake news stand for $124.99. That one I had to go over. There's also the Strasbourg Tower down here. Just going through some of these. Oh, that's interesting. These are kits, apparently. Going through. I'm not sure if there's going to be another section to this or not, because the accessories like these are usually the last parts of the catalog. Fast track. Layout options, remote controls, layout control, other stuff. And then they throw an HO scale at the very end. And then ready to play, which is basically battery operated. What is this? What is this? You did good on... The Harry Potter Express looks more like the Flying Scotsman than a GWR class, but... What is this? It looks like the boiler of a 242 O-gauge train set, and everything else came from the 440. Just, no comments on that. Then we have a few art things from last year's catalog, so that's nice. Other stuff. And that is it. Oddly enough, we have a blank background for the catalog. So, overall thoughts? Legacy series has definitely had some of the most creative liveries throughout the entire catalog, with the award of Best Locomotive going to New York Central Pacemaker right here. That's the award for Best Legacy Locomotive in the catalog, in my personal opinion at least. But other than that, we've had a lot of very interesting liveries, especially the SD70 Heritage units. That's another key point for this. And of course, there's also the Acelas, to say the least, which got everyone talking. I think these were some of the first photos that were leaked. And a very interesting catalog overall. Definitely did not disappoint. I know I may be going on for a little bit, as this may be my longest video to be uploaded, but it's a catalog review, and I have a lot to say about this for this year. And it's a Volume 1 catalog. It's where most of the stuff for the new year is released, and it's just Lionel being very creative. Some may like it, some may not. I personally like most of the stuff, not counting the battery-powered, whatever you call that at the very end, but the Legacy series, it never fails to impress. See what they have to do every year. So that is my review, a very long review might I add, of the Volume 1 2021 catalog. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and have a good day.